since the 2010-2011 season. And we now welcome in Clippers President of Basketball Operations, Lawrence Frank. And Lawrence, thanks for joining us and what's got to be a really busy week for you.
Yeah, very exciting week, but busy.
Yeah, in fact, can you describe what this week is like for you and where you're at in your preparations for Thursday's draft?
Yeah, you're basically at the point, it's an accumulation of all the work that the scouts and front office staff has done over the course of the year. And basically, we brought our scouts in last Thursday, and you have meetings throughout. We have our board done, so basically you 1 through 60, and then you factor in a bunch of different options and alternatives. And there's a lot of debates and discussions, and it gets heated, but it's passion. You love to see the scouts and the front office staff kind of stand up for the players they believe in and to listen to each other. And now we're excited about the rest of the week and obviously Thursday.
Lawrence, to have 12 and 13 in the draft, it kind of puts you in a unique position where, listen, you've got to be ready for the chance to move up in the draft and get at some guys in the lottery and the guys who may fall to you. But then you could drop back with one of your picks. And I would imagine you really have to feel like you've got a command of 1 through 35, 1 through 40, because you may be picking any of those players based on a deal that happens on draft night.
Yeah, it's a great point, Adrian. I think that's why, look, we're prepared to draft 2 very good players at 12 and 13. But you also have to prepare for all the different alternatives and options, whether it's moving up, moving back, trading the picks for an established NBA player. So we're lucky that we have a very, very good staff that's prepared to basically pivot in either direction.
Lawrence, fast forward 2 weeks from now with free agency about to start. There's a big decision with DeAndre Jordan with his player option. But besides Jordan, what's the sales pitch for the Clippers heading into free agency? I know there's a possibility that you might have some limited money there, but if you're pitching a free agent about Los Angeles, what's the #1 thing that you're telling them?
Well, I think, look, we're building a sustainable, high-performing organization that wants to be competitive for championships for a long time. So I think it starts first with our owner, with Steve Ballmer, who's the wealthiest owner in all professional sports. And I think everyone sees the enthusiasm and the engagement, but it's his humility and his honesty and accountability. We have a championship coach in Doc Rivers, and I think everything revolves around our players. And I think when you look at our players overall, they're competitive, tough, hard-playing, high IQ guys. So we feel really good as not just we go into the draft and free agency, as we continue to build this and look long-term of where we're going to be, not just in the present, but in the future as well.
Lawrence, DeAndre Jordan has his player option here coming up for this year. He can decide whether to opt in or opt out, become a free agent. How do you view him in your kind of your future landscape, short-term, long-term? Is there a possibility that you could still negotiate an extension with him? How are you looking at the situation with DeAndre?
Yeah, well, obviously, look, we have a lot of admiration for DJ and his contributions here. I think, look, DJ, as you said, he has a player option for 2018-19, and he's earned the right, and we respect the fact that if he chooses to be a free agent, that he's earned that right. So I think over the next couple of weeks, we'll see how it plays out. If he chooses to be a free agent, we'll be prepared from that standpoint as well.
Well, it's certainly a new era with DeAndre Jordan, the last player of the Lob City era, for now. But you do have a lot of veterans on your ball club. So what is your approach looking ahead to this season?
Yeah, I think as you look with the draft, which is very exciting from the standpoint of we can add, 2 very good players. We talked about some of the different alternatives. But I think moving forward, you look at some of the veteran core we have. You have Pat Beverly, who we see here every day working his tail off to get back from microfracture surgery. You have Lou Williams, who, if everyone's done the right thing, he'll be 6th Man of the Year award. You look at Tobias Harris, who we think is one of the emerging kind of prime players in this league. Danilo Gallinari coming back, and along with some of the other guys that we've discussed, coupled with the draft picks, we feel really good going forward.
Well, good luck on Thursday, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us, Lawrence.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
As we look at the key dates heading into free agency, June 29th, critical date for a lot of big names. LeBron James, DeAndre Jordan, and Paul George all must choose to opt in or opt out of their player options by the 29th. And those three guys could join Chris Paul and DeMarcus Cousins, who are already unrestricted free agents. So let's talk about some of the other big name free agents. We already spoke about LeBron James, and let's actually start with Chris Paul. What are you hearing about his status?
His focus has been to stay in Houston all along, and unless Houston blinked and sort of changed course on a kind of financial commitment, length of deal that they, I think, thought all along they would do, and they've shown no indication in Houston of not following through on the kind of big deal that Chris Paul expected when he opted in and got traded there. You know, Chris is going to return there. And listen, I think right now, Chris Paul's focus isn't so much on his own free agency. He's trying to recruit LeBron James to Houston. And that's somebody close to him said to me, he has his focused on recruiting LeBron as anything he's done in this league. He wants to find a way. And you know, Daryl Morey in Houston, he always is big game hunting. They love the ability to make changes with their roster, with their cap, be creative. If LeBron said he wanted to come to Houston, they can find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, one of the most creative general managers in the NBA, and Daryl Morey, Gerson Rosas, they're in their front office with Chris Paul. 5 years, $205 million. But for Houston, there's not much, there's not much leverage there. It's similar to Drew Holiday last year. I mean, you lose Chris Paul, there's not like you can go out in free agency and replace him. And when they made the trade last year with the Clippers, they knew that fourth and fifth year when Chris was going to be, 36, 37 years old, that's a contract that they're going to live with because they're in that win now mode right now, and you kind of worry about that down the road.
What more can you tell us about Trevor Ariza and the news that just came out about him?
Well, listen, Ariza's a player that Houston would love to keep, and he's got great value all over the league. That's a winning player. That's a player who I think especially contenders, have great interest in. And I think, but Houston, part of their core in Houston has been, with P.J. Tucker, with, obviously adding Chris Paul last year. But Ariza was a really important part of the chemistry. He is a great locker room guy. Players love playing with him. He's a popular teammate. He's important to that Houston team.
Well, you're right, but now we're looking at the costs starting to get up there. And if you bring Paul back on a $35 million contract, and let's say Clint Capella at $20 million plus, conservative $10 million for Trevor Ariza, that's $100 million in luxury tax right there, and $160 million in payroll. And we've talked about it, that's the cost of trying to compete with Golden State. I mean, teams are willing to spend that amount if they can put a championship team on the court, and they were one win away from getting to the finals.
And listen, it's a lot easier for ownership in Houston to pay that kind of luxury tax when they were up 3-2 on Golden State in a conference final, and you can convince yourself we're close to beating them. It's another thing for Oklahoma City to pay that kind of luxury tax on a team that got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs.
Speaking of Oklahoma City, just like CP3, Paul George was traded last summer. He developed a strong relationship with Russell Westbrook, but what are you hearing chances that he stays in OKC?
Listen, Oklahoma City made a great case to Paul George over the course of the season. When Sam Presti traded for Paul George, made the deal with Indiana, he had not had any conversation with George's representatives. He just flew blind and said, we're going to roll the dice. We're going to try to sell him on our culture, on our team, on our coach. And they did a tremendous job of it. And I think the Lakers took for granted when they did not make a serious offer to Indiana last spring that Paul George would just walk into their organization in July 1 this year. It's a different scenario. He may still end up in L.A., but Oklahoma City is in there tooth and nail to keep him. And they've got a real chance to bring him back. It may not be on a 4 or 5 year deal, maybe on a shorter deal. Those things are all up for discussion, but Oklahoma City is in position to be able to keep him.
Well, you're right, and I think my concern with Oklahoma City would be how does Sam Presti, their general manager, build out their bench with limited resources and try to retain Jeremy Grant, one of their key reserves. And the market for Grant could be around that mid-level exception, $8 million. With the luxury tax, that's probably going to cost you about $40 million plus, and it's another team that we see the cost going up. Raymond Felton's a free agent, so you need a backup point guard for Russell Westbrook. You have the minimum exception. You have the taxpayer mid-level exception. So you're really no first-round picks. You're really limited with your resources. And I think if I am Paul George walking into free agency with Sam Presti, my question is going to be, how do we get better from last year?
Right. Paul George was with OKC during the playoffs. It was disappointing. They fell out in the first round. DeMarcus Cousins was not with the Pelicans as they surprised many, sweeping the Blazers. Cousins, of course, tore his Achilles, making free agency just a little bit harder for him. And Bobby, if you're out there in that free agent market, what are the chances that you're taking on Boogie?
Well, there is a limited market, not just for DeMarcus Cousins, but a lot of free agents not named LeBron James or Paul George, based on we have 8 teams with potential cap space, and the majority of them are teams that are rebuilding, or teams like Los Angeles and Philadelphia are that going to be in that holding pattern waiting for these all-stars. But I still see Cousins as a close to max player, but I'm not looking at it as a 5-year contract. And I think for DeMarcus, it's more of a short-term 2-year contract, almost willing to bet on himself to come back fully healthy from recovery. But if New Orleans loses him, there's not anybody out there they can replace. They do get some savings, but it's not like they're going to go under the salary cap.
And I think draft night will be an interesting we'll start to get an answer on Cousins' free agency based on what does Dallas do at number 5. If Dallas goes out and selects Mo Bamba or Wendell Carter, takes a center, then they may be out in free agency. And so if you're Dallas, you're thinking about right now a young center, or do we maybe just take a perimeter player, take somebody else there? They would love to get a Luka Doncic. He may not be there at 5 for them, and then look in free agency at a Cousins.
And 5 of the first 6 picks may very well be bigs. And we're talking about a game that's really changed. You watch the Western Conference Finals, it's P.J. Tucker playing center in crunch time. It's Draymond Green, Kayvon Looney, Jordan Bell. So what is the market going to be for a DeMarcus Cousins in this era?
Yeah, because they're probably hoping that they can find the next DeMarcus Cousins or next Paul George or next CP3. Again, the draft is Thursday.